Hello and welcome to my spoiler review for Predator Badlands, where so many assumptions have been made about this film. I'm so excited to be able to discuss it with you now in depth to see if maybe your assumptions have changed now that you've seen it, or if you're watching this spoiler review without having seen the movie, maybe I might be able to pique your interest a little bit and you'll be like, maybe I should give it a chance. And in that regard, I want to tell you a story that somebody just told me last night. And I was like, oh my God, I got to share this. I got to spread this story around. So it's about our friend Jimmy C. Turns out Predator Badlands director and producer, and he did the story. He didn't script this one, but he helped come up with the story. Dan Trachtenberg. He took a long drive to see Jimmy C, who was making the Avatar movies. And he said, Jimmy, how did you make a Terminator likable? I want to do that with a Predator. And Jimmy thought about it. Think. And he said, you know what, Dan? I don't think you can do it with a Predator. But Trachtenberg was not deterred. This was the franchise he had. So when he eventually finished the film and showed it to Jimmy C, you know what Jimmy C said? He said, well, you did it, Dan. You made that Predator likable. That's such a good story. And Disney should be doing more to spread that around. When Tom Cruise said he liked The Flash, Warner Brothers wouldn't shut up about it. I mean, it didn't work. But still, I would be getting this headline out a whole lot more. Why isn't Jimmy's? I'd be like, you know, there are both Disney movies. I'd be like, Jimmy, can't you go stand on this red carpet and say some nice stuff? But the reason I heard this story was I have an industry friend who told me about this article last night. And she has had no interest in this film. Every time I bring it up, she's like, that movie looks horrible. I'm not going to see it. But then suddenly when we were discussing it last night, she had interest in it. And it's this article that changed her mind. She was like, maybe I should go. Because I was trying to tell her like a little bit about it. And she's like, don't ruin it for me. I might go now. So I love it. And just like in Terminator 2, Trachtenberg humanizes his killing machine by giving him a found family, which, by the way, is exactly what James Gunn did in Guardians of the Galaxy. But Guardians of the Galaxy is a sillier film. It has its serious moments. It's like the inverse. Like the serious to comedic ratio in Guardians of the Galaxy. No, that's not true. I guess that silly to serious. You know, Predator Badlands, I think, has a couple of, maybe you could categorize them as silly moments here and there. But I think Trachtenberg was brilliant to look at another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I told you in my non-spoiler review that it had the vibe of an Arnold Schwarzenegger comedy. But it keeps that more 90s, hardcore, more masculine vibe that I think people will be pleasantly surprised to see that even for all the different things that Trachtenberg introduces to the franchise, it still retains that feeling, that vibe. So did you connect with Dek in this movie? If so, which scene did it for you? For me, it was this scene. It was actually a scene very early on in the film. I believe the second scene. You know, first they have, they got to start out with like some classic Predator on Predator action. But then, you know, we see some bonding between Dek and his older brother, Kwei, who is the Predator that everybody imagines, right? And Dek is the run to the litter. But, Kwei is saying, oh, you can prove yourself. You can prove yourself to our father. And Dek's like, by killing this Kalisk? And Kwei's like, whoa. He's like, I don't even think I could kill the Kalisk, or Dad could do it. You think you're going to do it? But then they're interrupted by their father, who's like, I thought you were going to kill this runt. And Dek's like, what? This is how the scene's going down. But basically, the dad feels that they have to cut out the weakness, cull the weakness from the clan. But as we just learned in the same scene, when they were younger, Dek saved his brother's life. Maybe by accident, but he did. So Kwei just cannot take his life. But that's unacceptable to his father. So to protect his younger brother, Kwei forces Dek inside his own ship. And Dek, therefore, is forced to watch helplessly as their father kills Kwei for disobeying him, because he says that to forgive weakness is weakness itself. And then Kwei's last act, instead of going for his sword, he goes for his armor cuff that allows him to launch his ship, which, hey, what do you know? Because they've been talking about the Kalisk on Genna. That's where he goes. But that was great to see Dek banging on the, thankfully, see-through door of the ship so he could watch this whole scene unfold, crying out for his brother, screaming. He wasn't crying. He was screaming in a mix of rage and horror. I felt it. I felt this predator's feelings. And I also really felt the bond between the two brothers. That's when, again, in the second scene of the movie, I couldn't believe it. I was like, you're making me care about this snake-faced killer. But I really did come to care about Dek. So that's when the movie, I think, really got me. And then, of course, I was just that's when what's the quote from Leonardo DiCaprio? You had my curiosity with this scene, but you got my attention when Elle Fanning's synthetic showed up. I was like, this movie's amazing. And on that note, because this is the spoiler review, let's talk about the things that really got me excited about this movie. That when I saw it, I couldn't wait to be able to talk to you about it. Now's the time. Spoiler review, baby. The ending here is fantastic. Oh my goodness, really putting everything in place for a potential sequel. I hope when the movie ended, my first tweet was sequel. And I'm curious if you felt the same way. But Dek returns home with his new team, a synthetic and very quickly growing space monster. And then after his father proves he'll never change, Dek has to kill his dad. Well, his dad's like, maybe I was too harsh on you. But he's like, you're never going to change, and you killed my brother. I mean, I think they just had Dek say he wasn't going to kill his dad so that he would still kind of like be heroic. Because, they're trying to, I think, make him a little bit more of a family-friendly character. Because, money, it worked for me. Some of you might be horribly offended by this change. But there are other predators that you can go, other bloodthirsty predators, I'm sure. But that's not Dek. So he kills his dad, and then we see another huge ship approaching. And Thia's like, friends of yours? And he goes, no, it's my mother. Oh, I laughed so hard. I loved it. I thought that was such a great idea, because wait until she sees the new lady in her son's life. I mean, it's a classic setup for, I think, like rom-com situation. So I thought it was great in that regard. And then also, while female Yucha have been introduced in comics and video games, etc., I don't believe they've ever been showcased in a movie. So that could also be a lot of fun. I think it's a great idea. I loved it, but I'm wondering how you reacted to it. When you saw this ending, did you immediately go, bring this sequel on? Or were you like, I think I just threw open my mouth a little bit? Then the third act. I hope none of this was spoiled for you because it was such a good time. I felt so. So when Dek at the beginning of the movie crash lands on Genna, he's not only separated from his ship, but then Thia's synthetic twin Tessa, we're going to speak about that. She ransacks all of his weapons from his ship to use herself. So he's forced to recreate his Yucha armor and weapons from the resources of Genna, from the deadly plant life to that awesome snake eel with acid projectile spit who sits on his shoulder adorably and recreates the iconic Yucha shoulder cannon. Oh, that was so great. And then when that eel, it looked just like a giant blood vein or something, a vessel. But darn it, in those few minutes, if I didn't come to care for that thing. So when it sacrificed itself for Dek, I felt as bad about that as Dek did. By the way, also very James Gunn Guardians of the Galaxy, really caring about animals and bringing them in. Well, here it was aliens, but still, you get the parallel. But here you have a predator who not only learned to work with others, but came to care about others as well. It was beautiful, man. I like that about the wolf. That was really great that Thia told him about the wolf on Earth, where the alpha is not the one who kills the most, but the one who protects the pack and therefore gets fierce loyalty from the rest of the wolves. I was like, that's a good story to tell a predator, Thia. Well done. And speaking of Thia, her fight in the third act was incredible. When she was still split in two and her legs became free and came to find her. You think Thing from the Addams Family can do a lot as just a hand? Well, how about a pair of legs? And as any Black Widow will tell you, you can do an awful lot of damage with just the lower half of your body. And this fight I thought was extremely creative, funny, and thrilling. And very, I loved when she was giving herself a high five and stuff and the legs would play dead. I mean, it was just so great. And there was one moment where her legs backflipped. It did like that run up the wall and then backflipped over the synth that was, they took down a bunch of synths, but that last one, and then the legs took them out. It was incredible. It was such an amazing move, my audience oohed and awed. And I was so keyed in that I think they applauded it. I think a couple people applauded it, but I was myself just like, this is incredible. I know some of you were very hesitant to have such a large female role in a Predator movie. And some of you were very upset about it. But I hope maybe you've given the movie a chance. And now that you have seen it, do you maybe, thanks to cool scenes like this, and I think the fact that the movie maintains Dek as the true lead of the film and the leader of the group, do you feel maybe that Thia is actually a cool character after all? So I was really impressed that the ad campaign for this movie had managed to keep it a secret that Elle Fanning plays two synthetics. I mean, we'd seen a brief glimpse of her as Tessa, and I saw a couple people saying, who do you think that might be? I mean, that is a credit to Elle Fanning and the hair and makeup department, that just by changing the part in her hair and dyeing her eyebrows like blonde, see-through, and then, of course, acting, she really did seem so much like two different people. Like, really, they were very, very different. So I was so happy to have that surprise when I went to see the movie. And I was like, oh, has this surprise been maintained? And I was disappointed to see that Elle Fanning herself was apparently, just before this movie came out, going around telling people that she was playing a dual role. And I think that's a real shame. And I hope that, was it a surprise for you? And if so, did you like it? So as kind as Thia is, although even Thia is not above a little deception to protect herself, and I appreciated that. We don't want Thia to be a pushover. And she tried to make it up to him, right? She warned him to get out of there because Tessa was coming. And Tessa, well, this was interesting. Tessa tried to save Thia from the Kalisk, just as Kwei had tried to save his brother Dek from their father, right? Both trying to save, two sets of siblings trying to save the weaker, softer one from a monster. I love it. But while Dek's brother didn't survive his act of kindness, Tessa does, thanks to one of the other synthetics bringing her back and her getting a patch job from Weyland Yutani. But almost being put out of commission shows her the error of her ways, and she becomes the kind of cold-hearted killing machine that Dek's dad would love. Right? By the way, not only is Mother, that Tessa is talking to throughout the movie from, the Weyland Yutani AI operating system, not only is that very aggressive like the Yucha father, but also at the end of the movie, Dek's mother is coming into the picture. So you're going to actually have two mothers then. That to me is really cool, right? That we might have the Weyland Yutani mother and then Dek's actual mother. I love that. The parallels in this movie I thought were very nice, right? Brothers and sisters, monster parents, and then hopefully maybe going forward, two different mothers. Is there a romantic spark between Dek and Thia? We've had this debate before, recently in fact, with Alien Romulus. And I will admit, the second time I saw the film, I could see that maybe it wasn't there, right? But I gotta tell you, I'm gonna see this movie again, but I'm fairly confident that this is what the movie intends. Here's why. And again, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on it. So they have a meet cute. I feel it's very much a meet cute. And Dek and Thia very much represent classic male and female behavior and attitudes, especially like in romantic comedies. Like, did you ever see The Shop Around the Corner? Same kind of banter. So it's very similar. And then they almost like take on a child, right? So to speak, with the young alien that joins them. And then Thia is very moved when she realizes that Dek comes back to save her in the third act, right? And then, of course, Dek's mother shows up, which, as I said, is right out of the rom-com playbook for scenarios. Opposites attract, but let's see how their parents feel about it. It's classic. It's a classic. And then there's the long history of robot romance and sci-fi, from Wanda and Vision to the Sarah Connor Chronicles. One of you, in fact, brought that up when I mentioned this, and I appreciate you adding that to the conversation. Please, let's hear some more robot romances, right? There's an old TV series, Man and Machine, and then frickin' Blade Runner. Thank you very much. And I have to say, I think these two crazy kids make a great couple. Seriously, I think Elle Fanning and Demetrius Schuster-Kolomatangi have great chemistry in this film. So what are your thoughts on Dek and Thia? Now, while Dek might always look back at Genna as the planet where he met his future girlfriend, well, I always remember Genna fondly because of that. That's not why he came there in the first place. He came there to hunt for a trophy to prove himself to his clan and his father and to honor his brother who believed in him. Well, again, as I said, his brother didn't think he could kill a Kalisk, but that was what they were having an argument about it at the time. And that's what they'd entered into the navigation system. So that's where he went when his brother quickly jettisoned him, right? And the Kalisk is, again, the deadliest creature in the galaxy, but we don't know why. But we find out it's a cross between Fantastic Beasts, very Fantastic Beasts coded, and Wolverine. That's right, as Dek finds out, oh boy does he, Kalisks have a healing factor, and a really impressive one. Like Dek cuts the Kalisk's head off, and the head reattaches. You'd think that'd be the death blow, but nope, this thing was still going. That's why he picks up the gun. I know some of you were absolutely aghast that a Predator would have a gun, but that's really, I think, to highlight how desperate Dek was in this scenario, and he didn't even use it at first. Thia uses it. They'd had a bit of a fight, but Thia was like, I can't let him die. So she goes back to try and help him. And she uses the gun, and it's somewhat effective. You know, it's Weyland Yutani tech. They came there for the Kalisk. They want to use its healing factor. They want to, study its healing factor for a bioweapon and stuff like that. So they've been there for a while, and they kind of know how to at least hurt this thing. So that's why Dek picks up the gun in a moment of just to show he's desperate and hit rock bottom. But you can't get that from a trailer, obviously. But now that you've seen the movie, did you feel a little bit better about that? The VFX on the Kalisk I thought were great, right? Showing the veins and the muscles, either simply, reconnecting like with the head, or when the tail got cut off, regrowing and intertwining as they grow. Like you could really see how the Kalisk was built, what his insides looked like. I thought that was cool. I also thought it was a great twist that the baby alien monster that they meet earlier was actually a baby Kalisk, right? And that it spits on Dek to mark it as a member of its clan. It's like, oh, I'm marking you. And thank goodness it did, because when the Kalisk is about to kill Dek and is like, wait a minute, you smell like a Kalisk. The Kalisk actually was a she, it was the mother, did not kill Dek. I did figure it out when I saw the Kalisk's face up close, the big ones. I was like, wait a minute, that looks just like that other creature. But it was a really fun twist. I really enjoyed that. I also loved earlier when they first met, the baby Kalisk imitating Dek. That was like a really funny sequence, and it was very Arnold Schwarzenegger in terms of the style of comedy. And I thought the best moment was when, Dek didn't like it. So he was trying to do things that the little baby alien couldn't do. So he picked up his laser sword and he was like, ha ha. And I love that the baby Kalisk picked up a stick that had a fire on the end of it from the fire they'd put out and was like, I have a fire sword too. And my whole audience and myself, we just laughed so hard. We thought that was great. I also thought it was a great twist to the story and a great message that Dek, he found a new trophy to hunt, a true monster, and that was Tessa, who was destroying Genna in the name of Weyland Yutani. As I said, they wanted the Kalisk to study its healing factor, but they were just decimating that planet in the name of science. Not really actually in science, really truly in the name of business, right? I thought it was really great. I thought it was a neat moment when she captured Dek and said, you are now property of the Weyland Yutani Company. What a great honor for you. Elle Fanning delivered that line really well. So yes, a lot of sins are, most of them are difficult, as we know. So yes, it turns out that Tessa is the real threat, and a formidable one, thanks to his weapons, which she's co-opted, his freeze grenades. They got a lot of good use out of the freeze grenades. I really like those. And they also played into Tessa because she was wearing that all-white outfit. It was really cool. And then she took a shoulder cannon. The chutzpah, using a Predator's own shoulder cannon against him. I thought it was offensive, and he was offended. And then her own Weyland Yutani weapons as well. It was a great nod to Aliens when she emerged in that giant mech suit. That was great. Sadly, though, the Kalisk tried to swallow her, and we thought that had worked until from inside she used another freeze grenade, and that finally did kill the Kalisk. But it's not before its stomach acid had melted off most of her synthetic skin. And she wasn't just a skeleton under there like a Terminator. She looked more like a weird metal Barbie that just had no hair. It was great. I really liked that, actually. And then they did the classic Predator kill as a team. Dek killed her before she could kill her sister. And then the baby Kalisk ripped off her head and spine. Yuja style. Yep, I love it. I thought it was great. He's teaching his new family his ways. It was a great contrast in the third act to have the natural danger of the planet Genna. As I said in my non-spoiler review, the razor grass was my favorite element on the planet. What did you like? And then also, it was going up against the manufactured danger of Weyland Yutani, down to all the synths that they'd sent to the planet. And of course they all looked alike, right? Why would you give tools individuality? Most refrigerators look the same. I thought that was really interesting. Why would they go, why do we have to design a bunch of different faces for these things? They come in 2 or 3, right? And this was probably a very cheap model. I loved it. And I thought that was great. The actor they chose to be the model for the synths, the worker synths, was great. Very generic. Very, very corporate. I thought it was a great choice. So yes, that's my spoiler review of Predator Badlands, where with a movie that's, for some of you, surprisingly controversial. And again, I think a lot of you just maybe aren't really giving the movie a chance. I'm really curious, now that we can actually talk about the film with spoilers in this video, to hear what you thought of it. Now that you've seen it, or maybe now that you've heard a little bit of the context, and maybe it doesn't seem as bad as you thought. And maybe you will go check it out, right? So I'm very excited to have this conversation down below. I always check the comments on my videos for the next 24 to 48 hours. So I'm really curious to see what you have to say. And of course, as always, share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and you can check out some more videos right now.